Hey everybody, Mike from Big Mike's Motor Pool here, and today I'm going to be starting a new project. This one might take me a while, so you may see some seasonal changes here. It may get warmer out instead of me having to wear this goofy ski mask contraption the whole time. But yeah, so as you can maybe see behind me, my shipping container shop is an absolute disaster. Mainly the problem I have is that there's, I moved all this stuff from a garage that I had for 21 years, 22 years, and it was somewhat organized over there, but it wasn't like organized, And I got a lot of hardware, small parts, extra tools, pieces of this, pieces of that, and it's just kind of like piled on top of each other, like this bench here is a little cluttered right now, but it's usually clean because I work off of this one most of the time. But I've come up with it, after watching a few different people and what they've done and looking and checking through, researching online, I found what I'm gonna, use and what I like to use. And we've been using these actually for our military truck parts. There's a lot of small pieces and a lot of kits I put together, so we've been using this system for that. But haven't built anything for working with this system. And I'll show you what we're doing right now. So some of the footage I filmed I didn't really particularly care for, or it got lost. So I'm redoing a few things that I can do inside from in the house here. And one of the things that I didn't like was going over the bins and what we're doing. So here is the first part of any kind of redo that I'm putting together is about what we're building this particular rack for, and it is these different organizers here. Now you can see I have two different sizes. I have the small, or I should say I have the large and I have the small. These are both made by Stanley, and they're a little more expensive than some alternatives, but I'd rather spend the money because in my opinion the quality is better, and hopefully I can show you that here. These organizers are pretty nice. We've got removable cups, and the nice thing about these cups is you can take them out, put them in any orientation you want. You can move them around, back and forth. You can just make stuff fit as you want, which is very nice because not everything fits in one size, and that's another nice option, is just having the ability to change things to suit your needs. Same thing for the large ones. These also have removable bins, and some of them are very, very big. You could put a whole box of screws in this if you wanted to. These bins here currently are filled with military truck parts that I sell. I have a whole bunch of these, and we're working on more. So part of the process of making this particular shelf rack assortment holder is it's for work and for just my own personal stuff in the can. But I want to go over the two different common bins you're going to see, which is the Stanley ones and then these horrible freight ones. Now, the Harbor Freight ones are cheap. You can get them a lot cheaper than the Stanley ones, and some guys, they just, I don't know, they have wet dreams of Harbor Freight. I get some stuff there, but I'm not a very big fan. There's a considerable difference in quality and also size differences. So if you're going to make your rack to the same exact dimensions as I have for mine, you can't use these. Only fits these. I'm going to go over the dimensional sizes before we get into these bins and what's differences there. The main problem with these bins is you can see the back design here. The side is free and clear, okay? On these, if you look, there's a piece of plastic reinforcement that's in the way. So this, basically the whole width you have is the width of the top of the lid, whereas the smaller width on this is this side. Some folks will try to hang these and have, it rest on something like that, hold it. That's not how I'm building it. I wanted a bottom with an angle iron, and I wanted it tight so that it doesn't move too much. With this particular setup, you have to use larger angle iron, and You can do the same thing, but again, you have to use larger angle iron to make it work because you have this extension where it's not, you need, that much more to get underneath the foot. I'm not a fan about that. These are also taller than these. And I would imagine that the tall box is probably similar, where it's taller than the Stanley box if you were to buy that from Harbor Freight as well. So let's get into the quality of the manufacturer. Now this bin here, I didn't buy this one just to buy it. I've got this is a set of JIC caps and plugs, as you can probably read there on the front. I got this at a local hydraulic shop. I saw it when I was there and I was like, oh, that's real nice. It's a whole kit of stuff. I need that. So I went and picked it up when I was there, and I didn't know anything about these particular organizers back then, so it was just like, whatever. You can see right off the rip, trying to open this is a little tricky. Now if we do the same thing with this Stanley bin, let's see if it does it from one corner. It's different, right? You can just grab it and lift it. Why? Because better materials used between the two of these, okay? And you can see it's crystal clear here, where this is like a opaque look. This one, it's flimsy, I mean, the Stanley one is also a little flimsy, but it doesn't move nearly as much. And I'm not paid by Stanley. I could, I don't get paid by anybody except myself. So this is just an unbiased opinion of, quality. Also, you get the same type of deal with the box. Now, this box is a little bit heavy, full of stuff, but you can see how much this is. It's not even, right now, it's just about starting to come off. Right about there, it comes off the table on this corner. Look at how that flexes to this thing. I think if you did that enough, eventually it's going to crack or break, or something's going to give way. It shouldn't flex that much. Granted, this one doesn't have as much stuff in it, but if you do the same test, this thing doesn't really come off the ground. It just stays sort of solid. So, in my opinion, this is just a way better box. And again, the whole difference is between these and sizing is you got to pick one or the other. You can't decide halfway through this that you want to buy the Harbor Freight one if you're going to Stanley, because it's not going to fit. Now, you can make a rack that fits these, and you can fit the Stanley ones in later, I'd imagine. But these are just bigger. So definitely carefully measure and change your plans if you're going to do this to whatever bin you're doing it with. The whole process is very similar. You just got to tweak it a little bit. Now, onto the bins. I mentioned the size differences, and you can see right here that these are all the similar bins, but the Harbor Freight ones are taller. And you can also see they're a different color. Now, the color could be because different material. It could be that one's thicker than the other, causing it to, reflect sunlight a little different. But I'm going to go with it's a different material, and it's also definitely thinner. Like these guys, you could squeeze the, they move pretty easy. The Stanley ones, they move, but they don't move as much. Well, you can definitely feel a difference. The feet are also shaped a little different. Not that that makes a big deal, but, something to note. They're both, I guess you call them injection molded. That's why you get the little tip there, and there's some draft on the sides of these, ankle, for release. But, these are just, I don't know, they're in my opinion, crappy. I don't like them. They move too much. Like, these aren't the greatest thing on earth either, but I'll take what I can get if it comes to something being better. So that's really the gist of it, what we're doing. Making a rack to hold these, and we're going with the Stanley because the Stanley is a much better quality product, in my opinion. I mentioned that there's two major companies doing this, the same similar design. It's the Stanley and the Harbor Freight. There's also, if you look around, Zorro Tools has a similar organizer from Westward, which I believe is their company. Funny thing is, it looks identical to the Harbor Freight one, and if you look the part number up, like I can't remember the part number, but in the center of the part number was HFT, which I think stands for Harbor Freight Tools. So I think Westward is getting the Harbor Freight ones, just rebranding them and using HFT as part of their part number description. So that's also one you want to stay away from. From what I gathered, they were considerably more expensive. I believe they were more expensive than even the Stanley ones, but they looked identical to the Harbor Freight. So if you're going to buy a particular organizer, I would suggest maybe getting one of each if you're not sure. and just looking it over. You know, inspect it, measure it before you buy a bunch, because I can't remember what these cost, but they're, I think the small one's less than 20 bucks, but still, it's, you buy 10 of them, there's $200 at $20 a piece. So it adds up quick. So make sure you get what you want before, you know, you go and buy a bunch of stuff. So let's take a look here at what we're going to build this out of. I got this angle iron that I picked up. A friend of mine had given it to me when he was moving. So it's a little crusty. It's been sitting outside for years, and it's you know, rusted up, and maybe some pitting in it. I think there's 3 or 4 full lengths of this. Anyway, I'm going to take this and start using it. It's not very big. Let's see what we got. You know, it's maybe 1/8. I don't know if that's 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches. It's bigger than 1 inch. But it'll be a good start to this project, and that should be plenty strong once it's put together and all welded up. So today, for the start of the project, I'm going to come back over here and probably clamp this stuff to the table. And we get an assortment of wire wheels on the grinders here. So that's what I'll be doing. Scrubbing down junk to make something beautiful. And these wire wheels, if you guys have never used one, this is a must for facial protection. I like to use more than just a pair of goggles, because these chunks of wire on these, they go flying off. When you use it, you'll find you know, a whole bunch of wire stuck in your shirt. So if you got a leather apron, it's even something better to wear with it. But the face mask is usually a better option. And a situation like this, with them being rusty, it wouldn't hurt to wear a dust mask or a do-rag or something, just to keep the dust from getting in your lungs. I'm not going to show you any of video of me cleaning these up, because it's pretty boring and monotonous. So I just got some of one piece done. I want to show you how well this is working out. Look at that, night and day difference. Steel's not perfect, but the price is right. And it's a lot less pitted than I thought it was going to be. If all of them come out looking like this, this will be a nice piece once I get done and paint it. I think this corrosion isn't really corrosion. Well, it's corrosion, but if you look hard enough, it looks like it was primered red with like red oxide primer. This stuff came with a bunch of primered angle iron I got sitting on top of the container here. That was, I believe, brick shelf from, and it came. This dude was a demolition guy. He was stealing stuff off job sites, you know, instead of scrapping it. The guys would take it home and they took a building down. So yeah, it might have been primered, and that might be why it looks so terrible. It's just because it's primer mixed with rust. Yeah, it's coming up nice. So I'll finish this piece and move on to the next ones. If I can get all these done today, I'll be a happy man. So there's the steel. There's 4 and, I don't know, maybe there's like 1/4 of one length there. Anyway, that's all cleaned up. We're going to use all that for the most part. And over the last night, I went and made some detailed drawings of what I got to do here. Excuse the paid in full stamp. That's just how I marked it, so I knew that whatever I drew was correct and wasn't a garbage copy. Has pretty much everything I need to know about this. The list here is just the cut list of everything. It's sort of color coded. The red stuff's all the 1.25 inch angle. Then the black was some flat stock, and then the purple stuff there is I'm making lock plates to tie these together when I make multiples. And then I have a stock list here as well, and also spacer material for making spacers to set these. So I'm going to make a set of metal spacers to use, so I can just drop them on, slam the pieces together, and I know they're at the correct space. And you know, something like this, see, there's the lock plates I was talking about. I'm going to make a plate to drill holes and bolt them together, so when I level them and put them up, I can have them all as one unit. use the wind here. It's a little bit treacherous today, but when you do something like this, it is very, very good to go and you know, draw up your plans and have everything at your ready. When you're stacking something like this in this orientation, it is extremely easy to screw up, and then when you screw the one up, or you know, the second one or whatever, it translates and amplifies the whole thing, and then by the time you get to the top guy, you're way out of whack. You know, like this is how many different stations I'm going to have in this. There's 12 small bin holders, and there's going to be 6 of the larger ones. Now if I'm off by 1/8 of an inch down at number 1, it's going to be over an inch difference at number 12. So you know, it's very important that you know exactly what you're doing, and you know, you do all this math before you make even a single cut. One thing I was smart about, I took this all these drawings, and I have the list here saved. I scanned the drawings into my computer because I'm not going to make all these right now. I'm planning on, I don't know, maybe making 4 or 5 of these for in the can here, and I'm going to make 1, maybe 2 for in the house, because the military parts could sure use a nice rack setup like that. So if anyone needs my drawings, I can email them to you. Just let me know. You may not be able to read some of my chicken scratch, but if you have any questions, I can also help with it as well. So I am going to now set up, I got the chop saw down here, and I'm going to get set up with that and get my square and whatever else I need to do some measure and tape measure. Set it up on the table here and get to work. Here's a little trick I wanted to show you that I did for this job. Now these right here are the spacers for the runners against the uprights. I have to cut 72 of these. They're not very big parts, kind of hard to measure. So I made this little stop bracket here. I just tacked it onto the side of my saw. Nothing fancy. And when you bring the blade down from this side of the blade to the stopper is 1.25 inches. You do something like that, it takes a little bit of tuning to get it correct, but not too much. Very, very simple, but makes it nice and easy. And to make things easy down here, this is something I made up a while ago. This is it's an odd size for the base plate. I think it's 2 3/4 inch. So I got a couple pieces here, tubes 2.5, and then the plate that it's tacked to is 1/4, making 2 3/4 inch. So it helps keep you level. If I didn't have this door here, I would just take this base plate and copy a frame into the side of the table, or I could just set it into it. But I like to keep the table close to the door, so I'm limited on space. But maybe one day I'll make something that's a quick connector, something like that. But yeah, so I'm going to cut 72 of these. Actually, I might do twice that because I got 2 shelf units I'm going to put together. So hooray for me. This is the worst part about this job. There's a lot of repetition and it's boring, and then you got to clean all these little things. Hours of work. All right, so to clean the boogers off, the best way I found is just take the grinder with a flap disc and lock it in the on position and then set it on the bench. Just be careful that you don't lose control of it. So a sander would work better for this operation than the grinder here, but I have a little sander. It's a hunk of junk, Harbor Freight one. I just don't have any paper for it, so I'm using this today, and it's working. It's pretty quick, so I'm going to keep going. So here's what I got for spacers to use. These are template spacers. This is going to allow me to quickly assemble the sides with the shelf runners. Obviously the small one is for the small shelves, and the bigger one is for the bigger organizers. These are 2 1/4 and 4 1/4 respectively, and it's just 1x1 square tube with some 1/4 inch material on top. There's no critical measurements here. I did these, I think, 11 inches, and this is the full width or full length of the shelf runner. I did it smaller because I was thinking maybe I might have to get in there and weld something and maybe need a little more room, but I probably won't. But it won't matter anyway because of the way the tube will sit in the shelf runner. So the way these are going to work, I got this spaced here. This space is the difference in the gap between the what would be the back side of the shelf runner and the upright piece. Now I cut all those 1/4 inch pieces to go in here, and these pieces aren't quite an 1/8, but new material I got is 1/8. But I set it so it would be, you know, 1/8 of material plus 1/4 inch would be 3/8 difference. So that's what that's for. So then when this would go together, or you would have, say this is the shelf runner, all right, it's already tacked on. You would set this one inside of it, and then the next shelf runner would just sit on top, like that. So you know, you got your difference here. So now I would just clamp these together at both ends, you know, and once the first section is done and straight, there should be no more measuring and no more setting, no more checking. It should just be, you know, set the jig up, set the framework in place to get the right width, and just start hammering out some pieces. So hopefully this works out, but if it doesn't, I'm sure I'll tell you about it. Well, I'm back at it. I got most of my parts here inside the can. There's more stuff down there I picked up and on the floor, and that's what 144 of the little spacers look like. I did those over the weekend. Right now I'm cutting some more parts up, fitting them. As you can see here, I've clearanced the end of a piece on both sides. And these clearances, they don't have to be beautiful because you're going to fill them with weld anyway. Those are done so that the material fits into the material and lays flat, as you can see. It was a better idea of the drawing of how it's supposed to be. That's what I did. The dark black sections is basically the cut. So that's where I'm at. Cut a few more of these up, and then once they're cut, I'm going to start assembling them. And what I'm going to do is probably take and tack some pieces to the bench, and that'll give me you know, a jig to follow. I'll square everything up, and I'll have my perfect width on all these, and I'll have them square. Setting up the jig here, it's pretty easy. I'm using this big carpenter square. This bar doesn't really matter. I just put that wherever I felt like it. And then the square was flipped over against this and against the bottom bar. Clamped it all in place, got me square, tacked it. Now I just got the distance from the inside, which would be the outside of my outside here, which is 16 7/8. So I have 16 7/8 from here to the outside edge of the square. I put this final piece in there, and I should be set to start assembling. That's it for the first side. I didn't weld these or tack them because they're, you can see the gap is sort of large. I don't want to weld it to the table. See, all the gaps are kind of large, but like I said, these don't really matter. You're going to fill them in anyway. So then, next is just flip it around and do it again. You should probably brush out your form every time, just in case there's a little slag or whatever. Maybe just feel it a little bit, make sure you're not going to put anything down that's going to mess up your level, if you will, because a little pebble here or pebble there screws up pretty good. pretty good. Finish clamping it up. Tack it together. We'll see how this all works. Hope it works. Hope I can get it out of this mold. It's a little tight going in. But we'll see in a second. Let's see what she looks like. So my theory on using this jig assembly, mold, whatever you want to call it, is, I believe I mentioned already once or twice that this material is not 1/8, and everything was plotted for 1/8. So, being that it isn't exactly 1/8 like the other stuff, it's a few thousandths difference. Not that it should really matter, but all my dimensions were plotted for that, and this would essentially make it smaller. So I wanted to make this so that it would be the same width. It'll take up, and then everything will match. I'm probably a little bit OCD with that, but it is what it is. I can't. That wasn't too bad coming out. Looks pretty nice to me, but let's give it the test here. You guys ain't gonna probably be able to see this, but I can let you know. So it's a little tiny bit off at that end. It's a little bit off down here, I think. So, seems a little tight there. You can make a quick adjustment. This is the worst part of any kind of fabrication project, is trying to get stuff all nice and square. Nothing ever wants to be where it should be. That's pretty good. So, not bad. I have 6 total of these to make. So if I can knock these out and have them all the same width, that's pretty much where I want to be. The width is my important thing here. The length backwards, front to back, is not a problem because I cut those pieces. The dimension on that does not matter. So I'm pretty happy with this. I'm going to finish tacking it together, and I'll probably just weld all of them up once they're all tacked. At least I'll have something here to use as a piece when I'm setting up the actual whole side shelf and all that good stuff. So you saw me just cleaning these up. I did this mainly for appearance, and I want the drawers to slide in there real nice when I put them on top. Organizers, I should say. But you don't really have to do this. The reason I had to grind it on the outside, well, some of it was bleed through from blowouts welding where the gap was big, but you can just leave the thing welded on the inside and not have to worry about welding the outside. It's not really, if you don't care about the looks, you don't have to bother. In fact, the welds I did on the outside, I didn't even really try. They were just slide the thing over it and just put some metal in it because of a gap I wanted to fill so I could grind out. But yeah, I got 2 more of these to do. This is the bottom. middle and top support. The middle will separate the top smaller drawers organizers from the larger bottom organizers I'm running. So I'll finish these up and we'll move on to the next step, which is going to be starting to assemble the side racks so we can put our runners on, and I'll show you how to get our distance and spacing for each of the runners and make sure everything stays equal and the same the whole way. We're getting ready to assemble the sides, which the sides is where the runners for the containers organizers are going to go. So trying to make that another setup jig on the table. There's a little bit of stuff involved, that all the shelves got to line up perfect, and so you don't have one different than the other and have crooked stuff. And I also going to have these bottom, middle, and top frameworks going inside. So there's decent amount of stuff involved. And one of the first things I got to do for this setup is make some more spacers, which I have here. This is the thickness material that the uprights for the whole framework is made of. It's 1.25 inches, I believe, and we're going with 1/8 inch thickness, even though these are a little bit thinner than the actual 1/8. But anyway, to make my life easier, I'm going to be welding these little spacers to the table, and they don't look like much, but I wanted to mention them because this could be something that could ruin your day if you don't do it right. It's not that hard to do right, but it's something that's overlooked. You'll notice that the plate is not centered over the tube, and the main reason for that is because here's a larger piece of angle so I can show you. You probably already know this, but there's right in here a radius that you have to contend to. So if you were to go and do one, let's see, here's one I did that was wrong. You try to put this with the plate flush against the table so it's flush against there, you're not making it all the way to the radius. You're going to make it over to this wall, but then it's going to be floppy down here and vice versa. So you've got to set this up so that when it goes in the radius, it just goes in nice and clean and tight. That way you get a good piece to hold your angle up. And that's what these are going to do. These will be going down along the table. See, that's the crooked one. In this fashion. These are going to face outside. I'm going to set them on here just like that. So I can clamp them to each side of this. That's why these are 3 inches long. You could have made them like 1 inch or whatever, but the operation here was just to make these so we can get a clamp on the side and maybe on the top. Now the ones in the back, I'm not going to be able to do that because the two runners are going to go, or the uprights will be going this way up my bench. But I could do something. I could make clamps. I'm not getting involved in all that, running to the table. But we'll make it work. But at least we'll have something to clamp these to where they're going to be fairly straight. And with these things, you want to clean them up, okay, once you build them, because you need this surface, and this surface to be free of bugs and boogers and whatever. Like right here, I got a little bit of over weld, so I'm going to smooth that out. So you want a nice tight fit in the corner of the angle and the bench surface. You may notice I was doing all the tacking without the mask. Some of you might cry and want to be the safety police. Well, I don't really care. Okay, if you want to do that, just I don't know. Why don't you go back to knitting your blanket, Karen? All right. It's not always convenient to wear a mask, especially my crappy worn-out Miller one that likes to fall all the time. So if I'm doing stupid little tacks like this, I may not wear it. I might just turn my face. I can still see fine. Pass CDLI exam, okay? Go back to your blanket. Well, my spacers look nice, my backstop looks nice, so we're going to start setting up and squaring. First step in that is make sure your bench is clean. I was just up here welding, and I'm sure there's tons of boogers on here. What I usually do is move all this stuff, and then I'll, you know, get a little intimate with the bench with these fingers, and just feel around until I feel something, you know, and then I'll circle it. There's a little booger right there. And then I'll do that over the whole bench. Once I have all my stuff off, grind it clean with the flap disc, and then we start our setup. So the setup's almost complete. I gotta do something here. The either the material or the bench has a little bit of a warp to it. I know the material definitely does up top here. I'm at 12 3/4 here, 12 3/4 about the center, and about 12 1/2 up top. So I got to deal with that and figure out what's up, whether it's the bench or the material. Likely I'm going to have to make some sort of clamps back here, which it's not a big deal. I'll have to just make something up, probably with a nut and a bolt and a piece of angle iron, and just weld it to the table. Because it's only a little bit of spring. It's not like it's anything major, but if I weld it together with a little bit of spring, it's all going to stay together with a little bit of spring, and I'm trying to get this pretty straight and even. So that's the project I'm going to tackle right now. Alright, so here's the rail setup. Decided to go with these two homemade table clamps. I really didn't want to because they're not easy to move. You know, they're welded to the table and I got to cut it and grind it, whatever. But I'm only doing half and then half, so I know where I had to stop for the bottom half, and then I have to stop for the top half. So once the bottom half is done, I'll transfer this one down here somewhere in between one of those to get it back where it should be. Maybe possibly, I mean, I might even tack that to the table, if tack the runner to the table, if that's if I got room to cut it, you know, afterwards. I'm not trying to make more work than it's worth, but so I got 12 3/4 at the top, 12 3/4 here about the middle, and 12 3/4 at the bottom. Butt it up against my backup plate here, and ready to start throwing steel at this thing. Okay, so we're starting the runners that the shells actually sit on, and I got, this is the bottom. We're going to start the bottom because I want the bottom to be definitely all the same. There's room for a slight tweak of adjustment in the top should we need it. I got this piece of angle sitting here. It's going to be a easy setup backstop. Probably just hold it and something like that. The back well, bottom plate portion framework, whatever you want to call it. I got that tacked on. I don't know if I'm going to fully weld this in place yet on here. I may wait till I get the other side done and then just sit it on top of each other and weld it in, because I can't build the second one the same way. But I really wanted this here, just, I mean, I could have used a piece of steel, but just to have you know, something here to give me my lineup. I got a little trim to do there real quick. But so here's an instance where we had a little bit of a loss of footage. I had a lot of problems with my phone with this video. I changed a lot of the settings to get a better picture quality in some instances, and it really affected the memory, so we'll be changing those back. But in the process, sometimes I would think I'm filming, and because of this being out of memory and no storage space, it wouldn't be filming at all. It would just kill a video. There would be nothing. It wouldn't even beep, nothing, just over. So unfortunately something got lost, and this is one of them. And there may be a few more of these, I'm not sure yet. But anyway, basically I was talking about the spacers and how they're going to go in. Where it leaves off, I'm starting the first runner for the shelf where the organizers would sit. There's a spacer and it's flush all the way around, even, square, whatever. On the next one, I had set it up the same way where the spacer was directly underneath the runner. It wasn't offset. And I didn't like how it went in, so I cut the thing off and was going to redo it. Main reason I didn't like how it went in was because there was going to be little to no area to weld, and it would have looked stupid, and it would have created something a little weaker. Maybe even made it hard to clean. But anyway, in the following clips you're going to see, I'll explain what I did different and why I did it. So I didn't like how that came out, so I cut it off and redid it, and I want to show you the difference. As you can see right here, the 1/4 inch back spacer is now a 1/4 inch forward. This is going to allow me to get a nice weld here and a nice weld here without it getting all boogered up and having to come overflow in here, so it'd be less grinding work I got to do. Plus, it allows me to fill in a little bit in here. Now I'm not going to do too much, probably a good fat tack here, and then on this side maybe a good fat tack in there, but I am going to be welding it underneath from here. So basically just a little bit difference to the setup. I still got to clean this, but once that's in place, this guy goes on along with the spacers, and then our next piece would go like this and just sit on top of the rod. So it just brings it out just a little bit up there. So that's it. Let's start building some stuff. Oh, so before I start, the main reason I decided to change this was because when this was together just a few minutes ago, I did go and come on the back side and throw a couple good beads in here, which, you know, you had the thing sticking out like so, flush. So there was a bead for the 1/4 inch, and then there was a bead for the 1/8, and it was just too much. I went and let it cool off, and I slid a organizer in, and it was catching. So I had to rethink that a little bit. And with these new way I'm doing this, this should be no problem whatsoever. Let's get it done. Alright, so I got the bottom 6 done. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 compartments. And the next step here is was to put this in place. I should have videoed this, but I didn't. But it wasn't that intriguing anyway. Mainly get this in place and then just level it. Now, I leveled this one and braced it. These braces are temporary. The reason for that is I don't think the back one is currently still level. It doesn't seem to be when I checked it. It's not one of these things where I just want to trust going off of a tape measure and saying from point A to point B should be so much and match everything up. At least if this one is definitely squared with the rest of the the uprights, then I can just go off of this one when I measure to put the top section on. So that's where I'm at with this. And next is to start putting on the smaller sections, which I have a smaller tool I made for that. And it's the same thing as before. Just put stuff in there, line it up, square it up with the edges, and tack it in place. I've thought about welding this whole thing as it sits right here right now, but I think it might be a better idea to wait till I have the 3 support sections in place. I'll weld them completely, and then from there I'll weld these in case there's any warpage in the material from me heating. This is thin material, so there's a very good chance of warpage in this whole thing, and I think with these all tied together and welded fully, it's going to maybe slow down or limit some of that. So that's where I'm at. Let's get back to work. I got my helper Vin here with me today, and he's working on his own little organization process. I don't really think he's doing anything, but he thinks he is. We're not going to show the upper assembly of the runners for the the top half. It's the identical same process as the assembly I just showed for the bottom half, only uses a different spacer block that I made, which you'll probably see the larger and the smaller one. I'm also not going to show the assembly of the second half of the runners for the other side that I have to start after I get the frame that I'm working on currently finished, because again it's just the same over and over process, and you really don't need to see it because it'll be boring. So let's get back to it. So here's where I'm at currently. I got all 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 positions up on the top side for the shorter organizers done. And I believe I already mentioned about I leveled this guy and squared it up real nice to the uprights on both sides. And what I did was I went and checked measurements down the bottom and then made those measurements match up top. So this one here should be square with this one. And that's really all that matters. I mean, I don't want it to be crooked and lopsided, but if the square is off up here compared to this and these, then you could have some issues with drawer fitment in the upper or possibly lower section. The back, I didn't do anything with yet. As far as braces, it's very close. I think it was 29 3/4 from here to here is what it had to be, and this side's dead on just about, and this one's off like maybe 1/8 at the most, but I can move it that much. So I'm going to wait, and I will attach that when I put the top on. The other problem is you'll notice that being that my material was somewhat warped, I let off of there on the clamp, you can see it's moving. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to cut this off the bench now, because I got to start the other side of this. When I go to join the two halves, I'll probably just drop this back in place and clamp it down in the back, and probably over here, because like I said, this is the problem side. I might even throw another clamp up front here because the front is off a little bit, but it's nothing drastic that can't be accounted for. But the only thing I think I wishing I did different so far is the runners on the sides, the uprights. I don't know why I had it in my head to put these where the face wasn't outside. So now, like this would be, say, the front, and get a piece of steel here. Yeah, this thing's going to look like this when it's got the other upright, which should have had it looking something like this. And I think maybe in the future I may do something different, but yeah, something like this is what I should have had going. It would have looked a little nicer, and the joining face plates would have been together, but not a big deal. I'm going to make a few of these eventually, so maybe the next ones will be different as far as that's concerned, but that's nothing I can't live with. Anyway, I'm going to go and cut this contraption off my table and get started on the second half. Before I start, I almost forgot to mention, in here I started welding together the 1/8 inch size angled to the 1/4 inch spacers, because nothing's going to warp if I weld the 1/8 to the 1/4 inch spacers. It's not part of the actual upright. I got about to this one, and I decided to do this. So what that also allowed me to do is clean the welds flat. I don't usually clean welds unless they're really hideous, because I do make some hideous welds from time to time. But the thing you got to remember here is that inside this, the side of the container is going to be running and rubbing against it. So leave a weld sticking up, it's going to give you some interference, and you can't have that. And I was already knocking down the tacks I was putting in for each one, so I started just putting them in and using the big grinder to cut them down. But there was these ones left that something had to be done, and here's the solution. You can see this up close. That's a little flat disc, just like I got on the larger 4.5 inch grinder here. These are some cheapo eBay jobs I got years ago when I was doing some body work in a Toyota. I believe I got these for rebuilding I rebuilt the whole entire windshield frame. Like I used a freaking piece of a shelf, and I was just chopping pieces and bending them up and using this to get in tight spots to work and clean it up. But this fits in here real nice, and I'm sure I'm going to be using this on some other spots as I go. But yeah, this is definitely a lifesaver, because you can't. There's just places you can't get with that big guy, and this one will do it. And so these were cheap. The only problem I ever had with them was sometimes when you wing these things up and let off, if you don't let off the air while you got pressure on it, they can just unspin themselves. Like, it doesn't sound like something you think it happened, but I can't tell you how many of these I set flying across the room before. So it's something to keep in mind. They're definitely not as good as a 3M product that's supposed to fit this roll lock holder. But speaking of that, if you want to know what they are, just you can eBay search roll lock and roll lock sanding wheel, and you should be able to find some of these. All they do is twist on and off, just like the cookie wheels you use for cleaning surfaces. But anyway, now back to the project, and I'm going to cut this off and start on the other one. All right, so here we got the first half joined with the second half, just set in place. Nothing's even tacked yet, so I got to line some things up here, and likely I will start at this end, and we'll tack everything on here as a reference point to start with, because we have to straighten and square this piece here. As you can see, it's pretty close to lined up. That's just me setting it on. I didn't even check it yet, but if you look up here, there's a gap there where it should look something like that, where they're joined together. So that's telling me, this is definitely off some down the bottom, which was expected. This support and also this one should be squared together and where they should be. The reason I didn't do that one was because it was a little bit tricky after I had already started. I should have done it to begin with, but at the same token, much of this angle iron material here was warped, so it was really hard to try and get any kind of square readout. I tried it the best I could at the back and tacked it, knowing I'd have to move it, but I'm hoping when I put this together and stand it up, it'll look, you know, square and nice. If it's off a little bit, I'm not going to be too worried about it, but I do, you know, like to have things looking good and you know, uniform. The plan's going to be to get the supports welded where they should be, or at least tacked, and then I'm going to start welding in here. And these are the main beef of the weld. I don't think I'm going to do the bottom, okay, but in here I'm definitely going to weld. Now you can see I did the tops on the 1/8 inch plate to the 1/4. I didn't weld the 1/4 to the 1/8 because I didn't want to cause more warping, which I probably won't do anything here with that. But having the 1/8 welded to the 1/4, you know, in this position that's ground down, and then having it welded in this position back here, that'll make these plenty strong enough. Never have to worry about them falling over. So it doesn't have to worry, you know, you don't got to worry about having the whole thing, entire thing welded. Not only is it a waste and can cause warping, but this whole project is a super time consumer. It's a little bit slower because I'm, you know, filming the video here, but overall, like this, it's a lot of repetition and a bunch of little movement. So when you know, you're not getting a lot accomplished in a very fast amount of time. But anyway, you know, it's a big waste. So, but it's nice to have this in steel because this thing lasts longer than me, longer than my children. Grandkids will probably scrap it because I'm sure they're going to be a bunch of peckerwoods. But anyway, I'm going to get to squaring some things up, and then we'll give it the old tack treatment and see what we can do. All right, so I think it's pretty well good and squared up. So now I'm going to pop all these clamps, and we're going to take it off the bench, stand it up, and kind of, you know, give it the old eyeball test. If all looks good, then I'll weld the end centers and the bottom, all these center, end center and bottom supports in place. Pop these little gussets off, and then we'll get to welding the rest of it. So there's a nice good straight shot of it. Now, it may be sitting unlevel. I can't guarantee that the bottom is level on the floor. Right now I'm looking to see how straight and close everything is to being sort of square. And I'm going to throw some squares on it here in a minute and double check, but the old eyeball test is usually a real good one. I mean, I've squared things before that didn't look very appealing when they were square, but when they weren't so square, they looked real good to the eye. And I really would rather have it look nice than be perfect, if you would. So there it is. It doesn't look too bad. Let's see how bad it warped. Up top here, we got 17 1/8 on the outside of the upright and rails. Let's get down about the middle of it. And we're about 16th out, and you can hear little Vin over there. He's playing in the yard, making noise. Yeah, I hear you. Yeah, so back to 17 1/8 at the middle. This one's a little tricky to measure, but let's see what we got down here. That's 17 1/8. So overall, I don't think it worked that bad. Check the back side. Now, there's nothing to say that it's not going to work once I go and finish welding underneath each of these. that's a lot of heat that's going to go to this, even though, you know, I'm not going to have the settings too high. It's just that amount of heat and melt and then cooling, it's going to have some effect. Yeah, so it's coming out again, almost a 16th, but overall, I mean, this thing is very nice. I'm very, very, very pleased with that. So just having the center support attached to it has made it to where it is, you know, not all jacked up and wavy. Let's see how he did with square. A little off that way, leaning toward me. Let's see, this side. Let's see, this side's a lot closer, so this could be that the top is slightly off, or could be some slight material differences, but I mean, the amount that this is off, it's maybe a 16th of an inch here in the middle, but that also could be part of the warp, because there is a little bit of warp, so I'm not going to worry too much about that. I mean, looking at it from a distance, take another look without the camera in my hand, but yeah, I'm pretty pleased with that. So hopefully we can get some welding on it and it doesn't warp any worse than it is. Now for the moment of truth. Let's see if they fit. Oh, look at that. Just a little bit of room so it's not tight. You can go up and down, make it a little bit easier to pull in and out. Right in. Try a big guy. Go. I don't know if this one will do it. Yeah. Well, the little gusset's in the way, but the bottom one's working out too. I don't know if you guys saw that one or not. The gusset may be too low, and I don't know where the camera's at, but they fit. So now I'm going to leave these in place for the moment, and then I'm going to get to welding underneath so we can finalize this, and then I have to figure out what's going to be the front and what's going to be the back. Whichever looks the most appealing to the eye is going to be the front. You know, most of these are identical. I was very, very diligent in cutting them, making sure things were good. But you know, there's some things like a glob of weld maybe more on one than the other, or you know, vice versa, or maybe there's a chipped up piece somewhere. Like there was one of the uprights had a chunk missing out of it from when they demolished the building these came from. But the reason I need to find the best side is because I have to put some stringers going down. You notice they go all the way through. We can't have that. You know, it's going to be up against the wall, but you know, I want a nice, straight, uniform stack when it's together. So I'm going to be taking some. I believe I got 1/8 inch material. I think it's. I might have been a tack cracking. We'll find it out. Anyway, I believe it's 1 3/4 I got. It's going to go right down this edge and stick out into here, all the way down, and that's all we'll need. Just enough to catch the corners of the box when it's in place. So we'll get some welding done and we'll get started on that. So I'm going over this thing. I got it almost done. I still got to add a few things to it, but before I do those, I'm just running some checks here on the distance between here and here, because remember I mentioned it could warp, and it did a little bit. Luckily, I didn't have too much of a warp issue. Honestly, most people would probably just say to hell with it and let it run the way it is. But I figured I'd show you how I'm going to fix it. You know, just so you could have something to do if you get some issues. You know, the center and the ends are fixed, and the center of the shelving area is what's a little bit loose. These are running about 17 and 1/8, and this one's a little bit heavier. It may be a 16th difference. Like I said, not a lot. Most people could just, you know, whatever, I'll live with it. Especially if you're only putting this up as a single individual unit. If you're not planning on joining any other ones to it, you probably wouldn't even never notice that 1/16 of an inch. So, got this big Bessie clamp. As Surprisingly, this big expensive clamp, which I don't know what it costs, but I can't remember, but they're very expensive to buy. Someone gave me this. They gave me 2 of them. I came in from work one day when I was, this is probably 20 years ago, and a pile of stuff sitting in my driveway, and I'm like, what the heck is this? Who gave me this? I didn't even know who it was. Maybe a week or 2 later, a guy comes driving by in the neighborhood, and he says, oh yeah, did you get the clamps I left you and all the other stuff? I said, yeah. I said, I didn't even know this guy. He says, yeah, I see you do a lot of cool stuff over here, and I wasn't using them, so I figured you could, so I figured I'd give them to you. Well, I definitely said thank you to that guy. And yeah, I've had these ever since, but they a little bit overkill for most things, but they come in handy for certain operations, like this, where I'm just going to squeeze this a little bit and bring down the overall dimension. And like I said, I could probably let this fly like it is, but so I'm bringing it in. It's going to spring back some. I think to remember, if you go a little too far, you can always stick a bottle jack in here. You know, put some wood across and something down here, and put a bottle jack in a little extender piece of scrap steel, and you can bring it back. So you shouldn't go too far if you can help it, but if you do, it's not the end of the world. And so I got a nice little bow going here, and we'll release it, and you'll see it'll come back for the most part all the way. Set the clamp to the side. Let's take a measurement here. So we're looking at about 17. It's a little less than an eighth, but more than a 16th. And we got just about the same measurement here. I mean, this thing, it might be off by a 32nd, but I'm not going to worry about a 32nd of an inch. And if you look down this thing, it is pretty dang straight. So that's how you would fix that if this was warped in or out, either a clamp or a bottle jack. Now you don't have to use that big expensive clamp I just used. If you don't want to spend the money, you can always go to the Harbor Freight, Home Depot, Lowe's, wherever, and you can buy those clamp kits where you use a piece of steel pipe, and you know, maybe a little bit harder to turn just because that's a small handle on those. They're not meant for applying mass amounts of torque like that big Bessie clamp, but it'll get the job done. In worst case, you could always, you know, warm this up a little bit with the torch before you do it, make it turn easier. But yeah, so that's really how you go about straightening something. And like I said, you got to bring it back, put a bottle jack in. So I figured out that I want this side to be the rear of the whole shelf system. And I don't know if you remember, I mentioned the way I'm going to keep the organizers from blowing out the back is to put strips of this steel 1/8 inch on the back. It's very close, I think maybe even the same as the total outlay of the angles that are in there. And how I'm going to put it on, I'm just going to set this up on these little shelves I clamped on. Get me started. You can see it's pretty close to the gap, so it gives me something to weld. And yeah, right now this is sitting bottomed at the bottom of the little points on the inside angles. So this is a nice fit. It'll look clean. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on, tack the ends, and then I'll end up pulling the clamps here. I'll use that to give me a little bit of a squeeze as I'm coming down. I'll probably end up doing the ends, top and bottom, and then do the middle at one spot, and then on the other side. I just got to figure out where exactly this lands on an angle piece. But yeah, let's do that. Now I cut this to 58 inches even. The total shelf length is 58.5. So that makes it easy to figure out, because all I gotta do is bring this up 1/4 from the bottom and start clamping. This way you leave a 1/4 inch on each end, it gives you somewhere to weld, so you don't have big globule booger welds directly on two joints, which aren't strong. If you do it that way, it looks nicer too this way. A little less things you have to clean up as you're going along. So let's do some tacks. Tricky part here is you have nowhere to actually clamp to. Like, that's going to be perfect. Like, you can go like this, which will work, or you could probably come from underneath, do something like that. But you don't overthink this part. Just do whatever makes it work. Alright, so there we have it. That's done. You really don't have to even do any cleanup back here, unless you're planning on trying to join something else here later. If you're doing you know, some kind of custom build with this where you want to have a system, which I'm planning on doing something like that, but I'm not sure how I'm joining it. But I'm not worried about joining it this way. But yeah, might just knock some of these bugs off that splattered and call it a day so it looks decent for paint. I just got to do the back side of each one of these, and that should be it for this side. I just got to do the bottom. I got to flip this whole thing around. I don't like bending over to work, so that's it. That's how we're going to stop the drawers from coming out. So I got this upside down, and before I get into the next thing, I want to talk about cleanup. A lot of these welds I cleaned. I don't always clean welds. I don't think they necessarily always look ugly, and plus once you put paint on them, they're usually good. And you know, paint will make a welder what he ain't. That's the old saying. So you don't really have to clean them up. I did it for, I just wanted a nice uniform look to things, and some spots you had to, like under here where the rungs are, and this is upside down right now, but you could have a little bubble coming over because it would hit the side of the bin and whatever. So that's you know, one thing I did was just clean it up there. I also knocked the corners down on all these front rungs. I didn't get too technical with it. I just sort of ran the grinder over it, made it so it wasn't so sharp. That way, I don't think I would get cut on it, but you never know. I'm kind of clumsy and top heavy and whatever else, and it just, why ruin your day when you could fix it beforehand? But yeah, you know, this, I'm just about done, so I just went over this real good and you know, knocked down any burrs and bubbles and whatever, because this thing is getting painted. You know, I'm going to paint this soon. This is actually that'll be coming next. This is the last step I'm going to show you right now before I paint it, and we'll, you know, call this one done. So for my next feet, we're going to talk about the feet and what I'm doing for the feet, which should have thought about this a little better, but I didn't. I wanted to put them inside, but I never got around to planning it, and the welds are in the way. But I got these square nuts, and I could still put them inside if I want to, which would mean I'd have to go and grind the corner down on them and make it fit. And the only problem, I'm going to get closer and closer to welding into the threads if I do that. So what my plan is, I'm going to just put them on the top like this. Now this whole setup was 58.5 inches. I have 60 inches underneath of my cabinets to put this. So I got enough room. You know, this thing, if the bolt was all the way screwed in, it's only going to be maybe an inch. Let's see. Less than an inch. We're at about 3/4 added to 58.5. So that would make that 59.25, which still leaves me a good air gap just to make sure this thing fits and I can wiggle it in place without fighting it, and it'll account for any variations in, you know, the level of the cabinets. If they're just, I tacked a piece of angle to the wall and set the cabinets on it and then started screwing stuff down. So it wasn't too much thought into putting the cabinets up. But the nice thing about these, I got these square nuts. They're 1/2 inch. And that's what I'm going to run, 1/2 inch for these little level feet. I'm not putting anything on the bottom of the bolt. I don't really see a reason to. So Some folks may put some rubber feet of some sorts on there, but it doesn't really matter. This is going on a wooden steel floor, probably more steel toward the front. But the, I don't know if you can see that, I got a little bit of a beveled corner on them, so that'll be nice. I'll put this facing down, like so. That'll give me some space to shoot some weld into, because I don't know that I'm going to weld all the way around. I don't want to get too close to the threads and screw this up. I could do it, but you know, why risk it? So that's what I'm going to do. We're going to put these on, tack them in place, and then that'll be that. Now, I was trying to think of some way to square these up other than just setting them on there, but without too much fight, there really wasn't any good way to do it. Thought about maybe using a long piece of thread rod, maybe 6-10 inches, and just so I can get up here and square it this way and that way and call it a day. But you know, you have to have something on there, which I could have done it with another nut, but it wouldn't be right. And for a little bit that these are going to move in and out, I don't really think it's even a big deal. So that's what I'm doing for feet. So since I'm going to be standing in front of the camera the whole time, since I'm limited on space, I won't show you me putting these on, but I will show you what they look like when they're all done. Alright, so I got the feet all finished up. And there's a couple things to note, so I'll just go over them real quick with you. I like the bolts instead of dedicated feet. You know, I can't remember if I mentioned this already or not, but these, you know, bolts you can just change out and put different ones in if you need something different. Like say your floor is drastically malformed on one side because of the way it was poured, and maybe there's a lip or they just didn't get it flat, or something to that effect. You could take one of these bolts out and put in a longer one if you had to at a certain corner to make it level. But with what I got in here, these are 1 inch long, 1/2 inch coarse thread bolts, and I think with 1 inch, I should be able to level this thing out real easy and get it pretty good. And I don't really see a need for anything longer. So unless, like I said, the floor is super out of whack, then maybe, but otherwise these should be good. When I welded this first one on, there was a little bit of an issue. I welded it, the side of the nut, I lined it up with the upright here, which brought it over about 1/4 inch from the inside, because the upright's on this framework, and then I brought this side out all the way on top of the framework, and I went to put this in, the bolt, and it was, you know, getting tight. I just figured the nut was a little deformed from welding, and I was going to tap it out with a chaser, but upon closer inspection, it was hitting into the steel and the weld that's in the center joint on the frame. So I cut that one off, and what I did was this nut is now just inside the framework here. Like it basically, if you would have put it in the corner, but instead of just sitting against the steel, you brought it up. You know, so it's about 1/8 inch past here is where the frame is, if you will. And I just tacked it in on the corner. Used a long bolt standing up, and I eyeballed it, tapped it back and forth with a hammer, then tacked one side, and then did the same thing facing the other way, and got it to look pretty straight. So I'm pretty happy with that, and that should work out fine. So those are all done, and the next step now is going to be to paint. And I just got back from Sherwin-Williams, picked up some Sherchem paint, which this is a nice high gloss enamel. It's direct to metal as well. So you don't need primer for it. I mean, primer would help, but you know, something like this, you really don't need it. I primed my Toyota when I painted it with that stuff, just because it makes a little flex to it, you know, getting bounced around. But the color I got is a South Bend lathe gray color. I'm going to be mixing it up with this Sherchem 400 hardener, so it should have a nice shine to it, be real durable. You know, I painted the Toyota with this stuff, and I did the frame with black and with the hardener, and you know, that thing just gets beat to death and has all kind of debris and dirt and mud flying at it, and it's holding up pretty good. And this has been almost 4 years now of abuse on that paint. You know, obviously some spots need a touch up, like where the rears smash into berms and whatnot, and it hits the hole. But really good paint. It's a little expensive at $76 a gallon. I think this jar of hardener is like $60-something, but I had that already. So I wanted to keep it, you know, looking like a piece of equipment, and it matches my drill press pretty good. My lathe is a little faded. It may have been repainted. I can see some evidence of that, so it's a little off from the lathe, but eventually I'm going to be restoring the lathe and giving it a new paint job, making it real nice. But it's not there's a few different colors that these guys are using to paint these lathes, and this one is something the guy came up with that was a really close match to some new old stock parts. Maybe it isn't the most perfect, maybe there's something a little bit better, but it's going to be perfectly good for in here. And I'll paint all the equipment the same way, so it'll all match regardless now. I'll put a picture up here to the paint code if you want, and you can just copy, maybe screenshot it, take it if you want to get something mixed up. Yeah, so that covers the full construction. So now it's time for me to clean the shop out because it's a mess, and I need to move the toolbox down this end because this is going where the toolbox is, and being that it's not quite 60 degrees out here, I'm not going to spray this like I normally would, so I'm going to have to make a spot in the can. I'm going to fire the heater up and keep it going in a couple hours and paint this in here with a paintbrush so I don't get overspray and everything. But yeah, with all that being done, let's throw some paint at this bad boy. All right, I got my helper Vin with me today, and tons of clutter that we got to organize, and here's the first step, the finished product. Check it out. I think it came out pretty good. The paint looking pretty nice. It's a little not my favorite because I brush painted it, but I think part of the problem is being compounded by some of the steel. Most of it, I would say 98% of the steel I used was crusty, pitted old stuff. So it could be better, but I'm very, very happy with it, and it's only going to get shinier. This hardener is working its way to hardness. It's going to be a while before it's fully cured. So these bins will be coming out of here soon, as soon as I get the video done. That way I can give this thing a good week or two to cure up before I start moving things across it, and it'll scratch it and smear it. So we don't want to do that. But yeah, here's the finished product, and you can see how it all goes together. The way the spacers were and why they're needed, and it's the same for the bottom. So pretty solid build there, I would say. And doing it with steel as compared to wood saves you a lot of room, depending on how you do it. Some guys will just go and make something where the wood is right against this and it just hangs off this lip, which I didn't like. I would think it's a little bit weak to be hanging a bunch of weight there when the feet are right here. That way you could make them tight like this, but if you want the bin feet to actually sit on something, using this 1/8 inch steel is the way to go, because look at that. You really can't get it much tighter than that. You could, but it'll be too tight to move them in and out, I think. As far as fitment, we got some room up and down to get them in and out easy, and we also got side to side room, and that's all the way back. So everything is nice and uniform across the front. Yeah, there's a nice professional look to it. And I do like the gray color. It's very, very industrial looking, so I'm very happy with that. So yeah, there she is. I'm going to show you a nice little feature about this, so you can build this without having to hesitate about if you're going to have enough of one bin or the other. So say you built this and you got your 6 bottoms and your 12 tops, but you need a couple more tops. Well, in a pinch, you take the bottom one out, and this sort of defeats the purpose of having their own individual racks, but these will interchange. You still have the same amount of room, so that's pretty awesome. Like I said, it's a little cumbersome because now you got to take one out to get to the other, but if you do this with just one rack, it's not that big of a deal. It's something you could live with potentially, or you could just waste a bunch of time like I did and build a whole nother rack. Alright, so as I mentioned, I don't like the Harbor Freight bins. I like these Stanley ones. They're just more rugged to me and better built. If you are trying to build this to fit Harbor Freight bins, you're going to have to change my layout and measurements somewhat. As you can see, they look similar. Like, I mean, these things, they look like a damn near straight copy of each other, but they're not. So here's a Harbor Freight bin. I got this JIC cap and plug set from my local hydraulic supply, and it came in this bin, and I thought it was pretty sweet. That's before I knew about any of these. And you try to put this in, and it's too tall. Now the other disadvantage of these with my design is, if you look here on the corners, okay, you see they're different. The Harbor Freight bin has this little out bump, which is going to directly affect your spacing here and how I did all this. I don't know exactly, but that looks like it's about a ½ inch of height, where this is 1 1/8 just to the top of the 1 1/4 1/8 angle on the outside. So you're definitely going to have to either modify your bins, which I wouldn't recommend, or get a different setup with this. You might be able to get 1/2 inch angle and do it that way, but you know, I would definitely consider looking into the measurements thoroughly before you attempt this. The same is going to go for the Harbor Freight large bins that look like these. They're going to look the same, be about the same, but they're going to have certain differences that are going to screw you up when you make this to my dimensions. That just about wraps it up, but there's one more thing we got to talk about, and that is there is going to be a part 2 to this, but it's not going to be me building this same thing, which is kind of redundant and stupid. We're going to build one along the same principles, with the same sort of setup, maybe slightly different because of different shape, to fit these. Because guess what, you know, you can do what I did and buy a cheap 3D printer, which we're going to get into that too. But I bought a 3D printer to make different size bins for in here, because what if something doesn't fit in the supplied bins and you don't have room for it somewhere else, or it's too small to go in the big one, too big to go in a small one, whatever. These will fit things that don't fit in a conventional bin. But again, the problem is they're designed to stack on top of each other. But yeah, good luck when these things are full of, you know, like this one's full of springs of all sorts of sizes. And that's not the heavy one, but you know, I got one full of steel pipe fittings that are, you know, who wants to grab that all the time and pull it in and out to get, because it's always the bottom one. You're never going to find what you need on the top. It's always the one on the bottom is what you need. So it'll be real nice having, you know, a setup for these 30 caliber and 50 caliber ammo cans I got, and that's going to go in here, and there'll be some extra hidden surprises in it that are going to be pretty sweet, and I'm sure you'll like that one. Now, I don't know when that's going to happen. I'm a very, very busy man, and I'd like to start today, but it might not be in the cards. So that could be soon, it could be months from now, it could be next year, but there is going to be something coming similar to this design, but for these. I'm going to try to get it as soon as I can, but like I said, don't hold your breath because you might pass out. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the build, and I hope it was informative, and maybe it'll help you to do something similar to help you get organized, because for, I don't know, the last 25 years of me messing around in the shop, I haven't been very organized. And it's time, you know, it's time to be able to find my stuff. It's time to be able to fit everything in this shipping container, because there's no room in here. You know, there's room, but if you have a cluttered mess like I have and you can't find anything, and then you're trying to put more stuff in here, you're quickly just going to have a storage bin and not a workshop. So yeah, hopefully this will help, and good luck in your ventures with organization. And I'm going to have a few more videos in the same principle very, very soon. And be sure to like and subscribe for more exciting projects and adventures with Big Mike.